Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we uncover the hidden stories in company filings. And if you think today's report is just about numbers, get ready to be surprised. We're diving into a bit of a unique filing that sheds light on how some major funds are raising capital. Let's get straight to what happened on November 26, 2025 to limited partnerships. Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund LP and Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund TLP, which they collectively call the funds, announced they sold a bunch of partnership units. This is how they bring in money from investors to fund their operations and investments. Essentially, they sold off pieces of ownership in these funds to raise capital. Specifically, the funds sold units for a significant amount of money. Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund LP raised approximately $407.5 million, and Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund TLP brought in about $171.2 million. Together, that's a pretty hefty sum of money being deployed. Now, to give you a clearer picture of where this money is coming from, let's break down the sales by unit class. For Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund LP, they sold a large number of Class I units, which brought in over $279 million. They also sold Class S units, contributing more than $122 million, and smaller amounts from Class D and Class N units. Similarly, for the Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund TELP class, I units were again a significant contributor, raising over $87 million. Their Class S units added another $83 million, with smaller amounts from Class D units. It's also important to understand that these funds don't operate in a vacuum. The filing mentions that they invest alongside other Blackstone-managed vehicles that have very similar goals and strategies. Together, these form what they call the BXP Fund Program. On November 1st, 2025, the entire BXP Fund Program, including these two funds, issued interest for a massive $737.8 million. This shows a coordinated effort to raise a large pool of capital. Now, here is an interesting detail. The Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund TLP, which they also call the feeder, was set up specifically to allow investors with unique tax situations, like those who are tax-exempt or foreign investors, to participate in the main fund in a way that is better for their taxes. So, this feeder fund essentially invests all its money indirectly into the other fund, BXP US, in exchange for Class I units of that fund. This structure highlights how sophisticated fund management considers investor needs beyond just the investment strategy itself. You might notice the dates here. The actual number of units sold by each fund was finalized on November 26, 2025. This happened after they calculated something called their transactional net asset values, or NAV. As of October 31st, 2025, this means the final numbers were confirmed a bit later, but the transaction happened earlier. It's a common practice in private fund offerings to finalize details after a specific evaluation period. The offer and sale of these units were part of ongoing private offerings. What is crucial to understand is that these sales are exempt from the usual registration requirements under the Securities Act. This is because the investors are both accredited investors, meaning they meet certain income or net worth thresholds, and qualified purchasers, which is an even higher standard under investment company laws. This exemption under Section 4A2 and Regulation D is a common way for private investment funds to raise capital without the extensive public filing process. Now let's shift to the numbers that show the value of these units. Their transactional net asset value per unit for each class of the funds, as of October 31st, 2025, is laid out here. For Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund LP, a Class I unit was valued at $32.85. A Class S unit was just a bit lower at $32.35. Class D units were at $32.70, while the Class N units were at a lower $26.01. For the feeder fund, Blackstone Private Equity Strategies Fund TLP, the Class I units were valued at $32.58. Class S units were at $32.08 and Class D units at $29.09. Scrollers of the 31st of October 2025. The BXP Fund Program's aggregate transactional NAV was approximately $16.0 billion syscroll. Looking at the bigger picture for the entire BXP Fund Program, as of October 31st, 2025, the total transactional net asset value was a staggering $16 billion. This gives you a sense of the scale of operations we are talking about. So, why is this transactional NAV important? The funds use it specifically to set the price for all buying and selling of their units. It's based on the month-end values of their investments and any other assets, minus their liabilities and certain fees. This is a key metric for investors to underlying value of their stake in the fund. The filing also clarifies that organizational and offering expenses are spread out over 60 months. and ongoing servicing fees are taken monthly. It also points out that some potential future tax liabilities might not be factored into this NAV if the general partner reasonably believes they won't materialize upon selling an investment, which is a common nuance in private fund accounting. It is worth noting that this transactional NAV might be different from the net asset value calculated under standard accounting principles. Alright, let's bring it all together. What we've seen here is a well-orchestrated capital raise by Blackstone's private equity strategy funds. They've successfully brought in hundreds of millions of dollars broken down by different classes of units to cater to various investor types and tax considerations. The feeder fund structure is a smart way to broaden access to these investments. And who is signing off on this? Christopher Straiano, the Chief Financial Officer, confirming these transactions for both limited partnerships. Now, for my take, this filing is less about traditional financial performance like revenue or profit from a public company and more about the mechanics of raising capital in the private investment world. The significant amounts raised, over $600 million in just these two funds, indicate strong demand from sophisticated investors for Blackstone's private equity strategies. The different unit classes and the feeder fund structure show a thoughtful approach to investor relations and tax efficiency, which are critical in attracting and retaining large LPs or limited partners. An interesting point here is the focus on transactional NAV. It is their benchmark for pricing, and while it might differ from standard accounting NAV, it directly impacts the entry and exit points for investors. The fact that these are unregistered sales, relying on exemptions for accredited and qualified purchases, is standard for private funds. The key risk for investors isn't necessarily about the company's day operations, but about the performance of the underlying private equity investments themselves, which are subject to market conditions and execution by the fund managers. The transparency around the NAV calculation, including how expenses are amortized and potential contingent tax liabilities are treated, is good practice. In conclusion, Blackstone appears to be very effectively deploying its strategies for capital formation. The scale of the BXP fund program with a $16 billion NAV is substantial. The primary opportunity lies in the continued ability of Blackstone to generate strong returns from its private equity investments, justifying the capital inflows. A notable risk, as always with private equity, is the illiquidity and the dependence on manager skill. For this filing, it is a clear signal of successful fundraising rather than a report on operational earnings. Alright, that is our breakdown of this filing focusing on capital raising. What is your take on these private fund mechanics and what they tell us about the investment landscape? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis insightful, hit that like button and it really helps us out, and subscribe if you haven't already for more deep dives into corporate filings. Don't forget to check out our Discord community linked in the description for more discussions. Thanks for watching. See you next time.